All right, we're going to be doing Module 2, Lesson 3. We're going to be talking about adding integers again. So let's start with example number 1. It says, represent the sum 3 plus 5 using arrows on the number line. This is what we've been doing for the last 2 lessons. So the first number is 3. We're going to start at 0. We're going to create our arrow 3 units to the right. So the arrow that represents 3 is 3 units long. It points to the right because it's positive. And from there, we're going to add 5. So we are going to go in the positive direction, 5 spots. So the arrow that represents 5 is 5 units long. It also points to the right because it's positive. So where we end is the sum. The sum would be 8. So if we were to represent the sum using an arrow, how long would the arrow be, and what direction would it point? Well, the number is 8, so it'd be 8 units long, pointing to the right, because it is a positive 8. Next says, what is the relationship between the arrow representing the number on the number line and the absolute value of the number? Well, remember, the absolute value is the length of the arrow. So the arrow would be 8 units long, and the absolute value of 8 is 8. So do you think that by adding 2 positive numbers, we will always get a positive number? Well, think about that. If your arrow is pointing to the right and then you go further to the right, it's always going to be a bigger positive number. So yes, because the arrows will both be pointing right. All right, so let's do -3 plus -5 this time. So starting at 0, the first number is -3, so we're going 3 units to the left. So the arrow is 3 units long, but it's to the left because it's negative. From there, we're going to go -5, count down 5 units. So the arrow that represents -5 is 5 units long. It's to the left. Now my ending number is our sum, which would be -8. Now it says if you were to represent the sum using an arrow, how long would the arrow be and in what direction? Well, -8 would be 8 units long to the left because it's negative, so it's going to the left. Do you think that adding 2 negative numbers will always give you a smaller negative number? And think about that. If you're going to the left and then to the left again, you will always be getting smaller. So what do both examples have in common? Now, in the first one, we were doing 3 plus 5, and the second one was -3 plus -5. The first answer was 8. The second answer was -8. So both had arrow lengths of 8, but they were in different directions. So we can come up with a rule that tells us how to add numbers with the same sign. So notice the first example, both were positive. Second example, both were negatives. When that happens, we are going to add the absolute value and then use the common sign. So if the numbers were positive, our answer would be positive. If the numbers are negative, our answer would be negative. So before we actually add these, all I want to do is take a look whether the sum would be positive or negative. Don't actually calculate it. Just look at the 2 numbers. So if you're going in the negative direction and then in the negative direction again, your answer is going to be negative. Positive and positive will be positive. If you go negative and negative, your answer will be negative. Negative, negative, your answer will be negative. Positive direction, positive direction, positive direction will be a positive answer. negative and negative will be negative. All right, so now let's use the rule to actually add the two numbers together. So 15 plus 7, think of it on a number line. You'd be going up to 15 and up 7 more. So we're adding those two numbers together, 22, and you're going to keep whatever sign it is. So you're going in the positive direction, so your answer is positive. This one we're going to go back 4 and back 16. So add 4 and 16 together. And since we go in the negative direction, that answer would be negative. Negative 18 and negative 64. Add those two numbers together. You would get 82, and that's in the negative direction. And the last one, negative and negative, add those two numbers together, 8 to 328 in the negative direction. All right, example 2. What if we have 5 plus negative 3? All right, so we're going to start at 0. The first number is 5. So go up to 5. From there, we're going to go back 3. And we end at 2. So let's answer some questions. How long is the arrow that represents 5? Well, this is 5 units. What direction does it point? It points to the right because it's positive. How long is the arrow that represents negative 3? And that's 3 units. It points to the left because it's negative. Which arrow is longer? The arrow with the 5 units is the longer arrow. What is the sum? So where did we end for that 5 plus negative 3? We ended at 2, so the sum is 2. Which, if you were to represent the sum using an arrow, how long would the sum be? So it would be 2 units long, and it would point to the right because it is a positive 2. All right, let's look at the next one. 4 plus negative 7. So starting at 0, we're going to go up to 4. From there, we're going to go back 7. So we end at negative 3. Now, in the two examples above, what is the relationship between the length of the arrow? So this arrow would be 3 units long to the left, representing the sums, and the length of the arrows representing the two addends. So what it's talking about is, how do you compare 4 and 7 to 3? And if you think about it, all we really did was subtract the two lengths of the arrows. So 7 minus 4 gives us 3. What is the relationship between the directions of the arrows representing the sum and the direction of the arrows representing the two addends? Think about it like this. This direction would be to the left, and look at the longer arrow. This one's longer than this one, and the arrow that's longer is pointing to the left. So the bigger number, or the bigger arrow, is the sign or the direction of the sum. I can go back and look at that other one right here. 5 is longer than 3. 5 points to the right, and notice that the sum 2 also points to the right. So write a rule that would be given, will give the length and direction of the arrow representing the sum of two values that have opposite signs. So opposite signs means that you're going to subtract the absolute values. Which means you're going to pretend like they're both positive and just subtract. And then the direction of the arrow is the larger number. So you're going to take the sign of the larger number. Okay, and that's what it says here. It says subtract the absolute values and use the sign of the larger number. All right, exercise 3. So we're going to circle the integer with the greatest absolute value. So 2 is the largest one. which means that the sum is going to be positive. So 5 and 9, the absolute value of 9 is the largest, which would be a negative number, and that would be, our answer would be negative. Negative 6 is larger than 3, so our sum would be negative. And negative 11 is larger than 1, which would be a negative answer as well. All right, so when I'm adding two numbers, I'm going to subtract 10 minus 7 to be 3. The larger number is 10, which would be a negative answer. 8 and 16. 16 is larger, so that's a negative answer. 16 minus 8 is 8. Go ahead and try the last two. Pause the video. When you're done, just go ahead and hit play so that you can check it. All right, go ahead and check your last two answers. Make sure that you are correct. Remember, you're taking the sign of the bigger number. All right, last example. You are going to solve the following problems. We're going to find the sum. So two different signs means you're going to subtract. 18 minus 7 would be 11. Take the sign of the larger number, which is negative. If the temperature outside was 73 degrees, but it fell to 19 degrees, what is the temperature at 10? It fell 19 degrees. So 73 plus negative 19. Opposite signs means we're going to subtract that. The larger number is 73, so that would be a positive 54. Last one, we're going to take these two numbers, write a number sentence. So the first number is negative 10. The second number is 3.5. So since they are opposite signs, we're going to subtract those two numbers. When we do that, we get 6.5. The larger number is negative, so that means my answer would be negative. And if you look on the number line, that's right about where it ends. All right, so let's sum this all up. Adding integers with the same sign, we're going to add the absolute values. So we're going to find the absolute values of the numbers. We're going to, this is for opposite signs. We're going to subtract their absolute values. And the answer will take the sign of the integer that has the larger absolute value. Whatever number is the larger one is the sign in your answer. Okay? You're going to do the same thing if you had fractions or decimals. Go ahead and try the problem set that follows, and we will check our answers in class.